You know, there is nothing better than just sitting back and enjoying an ice-cold Dr. Pepper, and then reflecting on it out loud in lieu of absolutely nothing. What the fuck? Octavius?
What?
That's just something I say sometimes. Who the hell are you?
I'm you, from the future, and I come with an important message.
Is it that I look like a serial killer when I wear a trench coat?
You know, the heads in my basement, they said you'd say that.
What?
Save the scientist, save the world.
So wait, am I reviewing Steins Gate or Heroes Reborn? Steins Gate, I guess, was made in 2007 by Studio White Fox, the same studio behind the hilarious Devil is a Part-Timer and nothing else. Our story follows Rentaro Okabe, or
"'Tis I, Hoin Kyoma."
a scientist who's clearly seen Young Frankenstein one too many times. If you got that reference, go ahead and feel free to tell everyone else in the nursing home how hip you are. We follow Okabe along with his team at the Future Gadget Laboratories as they try to discover the secret of the Steins Gate. So what are all those words I just said? Well, the Future Gadget Laboratories are his apartment, and the members are the adorable Mayuri, who's there for emotional support, and Daro the Hack.
Hacker, thank you very much.
Yeah, sure, whatever. And what is the Steins Gate? Time travel. I'm just gonna say time travel on this one because it makes everything a lot easier on both of us.
The way you say it makes no sense.
Here at the FGL, members work on all types of inventions, from the Bit Particle Cannon, which is a remote control that looks like a laser gun and only has 2 working buttons, all the way to the phone microwave, name subject to change, which is essentially made in order to create black holes and send objects back in time, but really just seems to turn bananas into STD-rolled Hulk dicks. Our plot begins when Okabe and Mayuri head off to the Akihabara Radio Kaiken building in order to watch a conference about time travel from the renowned scientist Dr. Nakabachi, who busts a Melania Trump and plagiarizes almost his entire speech from a supposed internet time traveler by the name of John Tidor. This pisses off Okabe, who verbally cocksmacks him before Nakabachi fucks off, making way for a real scientist to take the stage, Makise Kurisu, who during her presentation proves my theory that I made back in my Pokemon review. Opinionated redheads are hot. Science. But also gets under Okabe's skin by basically countering every argument that he makes. Okabe sulks away like he just found out that the Pokemon Go servers are down again, or at least he tries to when he hears a man scream, and uses his super smart scientist brain to run towards the sound like an idiot, only to discover Makise dead, face down in a pool of her own blood. With his mind freaked like he just watched Chris Angel, BAM! I'm making timely references all over this bitch! He texts Daru in order to inform him that he totally didn't murder the girl that he just spent an hour having an argument with. Duh. But because plot, it turns out that Daru's phone was connected to the phone microwave back at the Future Gadget Labs, causing the text to travel back in time, and that is where our story begins. When people talk about animation, they usually couple it together with art, and that is because art styles are very easy to differentiate and therefore judge based on preference or effort. For instance, this picture clearly had more effort put into it than this picture. Telling apart the art that had very little effort put into it versus the art that had a lot of effort put into it is relatively easy, unless of course we go into like surrealism and expressionism, but fuck that shit. Nobody's got time for that. Animation, on the other hand, is the art of mimicking movement with pictures, whether it be CGI, cell, or hand-drawn, it's all animation. Simply put, art is how the picture looks and animation is how it moves. So why bring this up? Well, unlike a show like Attack on Titan, which regardless of personal opinion does have legitimately great animation and cinematography, Steins Gate doesn't have the best animation. Steins Gate has a lot of quiet moments without much, if any, movement. Studios do this a lot, usually to alleviate the budget, but with Steins Gate, it actually fits the show. Think about it, Attack on Titan is a show about children Spider-Manning around trying to kill giants that are so naked some of them forgot to put their skin on. Steins Gate is a show about a guy that uses texts to time travel. One of them just lends itself better to fluid animation based solely on premise. But Steins Gate doesn't need great animation, it just needs great art because again, action is not the focus here. Emotion is. And that's exactly what this show's unique art style has going for it. Every single frame looks fresh and emotional, and the palette and line work mesh together to create just the right feeling at just the right time. Honestly, I've never really seen a show with quite the same visual style as Steins Gate. It's really its own thing, and that thing works really well for me. And if you hate it, then I hate you. No, I'm just fucking with you. In general, anime soundtracks have this feeling that they were chosen to enhance the show. It creates a separation of sorts, and it usually doesn't fit with the tone of the show, but even when it does, it just feels like they found a really good song to go with the show, as opposed to finding a song that's part of the show. Steins Gate is the opposite. It feels like every song is intrinsically tied into the DNA of the show, especially the opening. It feels like the song cannot exist without the show, and vice versa. It's a symbiotic relationship between visuals, music, and story that I've never really seen in another show. Even with the show like Fully Cooley, whose opening sets the tone for the entire series, I always found myself thinking, man, they chose an awesome song for this show. But Steins Gate always had me thinking, this is the show. This feeling, this intensity, this atmosphere, the digital sounds, the subtlety. This is what it's about. Even the piano and electric guitar in the outro feels right when accompanied by the visuals. I don't know how they did it, but I feel like this is the first anime that I can honestly say has found the perfect soundtrack. It's like the anime version of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. The score, on the other hand, can be a bit lacking. Comprised of mostly piano, it's not that it's bad or unfitting, it's just far less memorable. Now, normally with the dub, I'd go over each voice actor and tell you how their performance was, but for this one, I'm just gonna say one word. Brotherhood. Not good enough? Need 2 words? Alright, Space Dandy. Still not there? Need 1 more? Alright, let's try this. Attack on Titan. So, suffice it to say, if you like those dubs, you're gonna like this one. The only main cast member to not appear in any of those was Jackie Ross, who plays Mayuri, and that's because Steins Gate was her first and only role, which probably speaks to why she's the only character that I have a problem with. Now, it might just be me, but Jackie always feels like she's either too young or too old to be playing Mayuri. She's like the lord of anime. Are you 14 or 42? Tell me how to feel about you! I don't need these feelings! So, that being said, sub or dub? Well, for me, the sub edges it out just barely, and that's in part because Mayuri just never really clicked for me in the dub, but also because the jokes, they just work better in the sub. Now, the best example of this is in episode 15, where an Okabe is trying to talk to a guy who he assumes speaks only English, so he acts like this.
I am math scientist. It's so cool. Son of a bitch.
Now that is hilarious, because it perfectly displays Okabe's awkwardness and inability to interact with normal humans, but it also hinges on the fact that he doesn't speak English, unlike the dub. So with that in mind, how does the dub deal with it?
I'ma bust out some questions, yo, so holla at your boy! Word to your mother.
Now, while that's funny, it's not funny for the right reasons. It doesn't so much display Okabe's awkwardness as much as it transforms him into Michael Scott, a vaguely racist idiot. Again, funny, but not true to the character, hence my issue. Speaking of characters, let's talk about the character who is so sugary her mere existence could make Wilford Brimley's foot fall off.
Diabetes.
Mayuri. Mayuri is a... Okay, yeah, there's that, but she's also...
もう食べたの意味で
Uh-huh. But in terms of personality, she... As you can tell, Mayuri is a catchphrase spewing Balamoe that's intended to come off as endearing, but they try to push that so hard that more often than not she comes off as grating. And by grating, I mean literally, like someone taking a cheese grater to your nutsack. Which isn't always bad, but that's for a different review. I don't hate this character, but it's just so transparent how badly they want you to like her that I absolutely refuse to. For the first half of the series. In the second half of the series, you start to realize that she's not all sunshine and rainbows, and she's not just a plot device, although it is hard to tell, she's also very intuitive, perceptive, and empathetic. Even though she doesn't understand the science stuff, she still tries to help and is often successful. She is the emotional crux of the series, a rock for all of our other characters to fall back on. She's supportive and caring in a way that all of us wish we had, even if she is a bit annoying. And now that all the irritating interruptions are gone, we move on to Daru the Hack.
Hacker, thank you very much.
I will kill your family! Daru is a hacker that lives on forums, plays dating sims, and watches anime. In other words, he's the show's target demographic, and that infuriates me. Sure, there are other otaku adjacent characters like Ferris who plays card games and cosplays, but Daru is the guy that the studio thinks is watching. He's fat, lazy, perverse, and kinda a terrible person. The fact that this is the guy that they choose to have the same interests as their audience goes a long way to show what the studio actually thinks of their viewers. I mean, this guy is so hard up for someone to touch his dingle, he'd probably hit on his own daughter. And while the guy does have a few sincere moments later on to try and humanize him and a couple of decent jokes, it's too little and too late to separate him from the stereotype that he already encompasses. Fuck Daru. Mokusei Kurisu is the redhead scientist that Okabe discovers having a face-down solo blood rave. She's very opinionated and independent at the start, not to mention incredibly smart, easily on the same level as Okabe himself, only more well-adjusted to normal human society. She's easily the second most interesting character in the entire series, especially when we start to delve into her backstory and she starts to see herself more as a member of the lab and a friend to the others. Her death is also the precursor to the entire storyline, and as such is the driving force for the series. I often hear her described as a tsundere, and I'd have to disagree, because a tsundere is only mean or bitchy to hide their true feelings and usually dominant for the sake of dominance. Whereas Kurisu, or Christina as Kyoma loves to call her, only acts out angrily when the situation calls for it. She's the normal character, the everyman in a series of otherwise quirky personas, except she's not boring and I find her incredibly likable. Plus, she has real use for the story outside of her initial series plot device jumpstart. Unlike another opinionated redhead. I'm never letting that go. Speaking of quirky characters, we come to the Zooey Deschanel of anime. Moeka. Moeka's entire character can be summed up in one quirk. She doesn't talk, she texts. She texts. That is her method of communication. Which I guess could be a commentary on the youth of today's society. I don't even care anymore. I swear to God, I don't care. She is very introverted and becomes interested in the FGL crew later on because they're looking for the same computer. But aside from that, she's mostly there for spoiler reasons and to piss me the fuck off. Now, unlike Daru, I don't hate her because of who she is as a character. Because that would be impossible since she doesn't have one. No. My hate runs way deeper than that. Partially, sure, it's because, she doesn't have a character for the majority of the show, but mainly it's because she's a terrible person. If by the end of this you still like her, then you and I can't be friends. There's a bunch of other characters, but they're all either a spoiler, pointless, or this.
Urishibara Ruka. Delicate as an orchid, fair as a cherry blossom. The personification of feminine grace. And a dude.
And finally, we have our main character, Rintaro Okabe, or
I am Hoin Kyoma!
This guy is a self-proclaimed mad scientist that seems obsessed with inventing things and the concept of time travel. He also has a strange phone that he pulls out from time to time to talk to a mysterious person about some kind of organization that seems perpetually after him, which is exactly how I assume Scientology gets Tom Cruise to stick around. He's quirky, neurotic, self-centered, narcissistic, and honestly just damn entertaining. He takes everything so seriously and speaks so properly that the guy can't help but be incredibly endearing and make you laugh out loud repeatedly without ever even trying to. As our story progresses, he also shows a true depth of character as oftentimes his facade is snatched away, usually due to terrible circumstances, and he's forced to drop the Kyoma act and just be Rintaro. A heartfelt, sincere, curious scientist that cares deeply about his friends and the world around him. The image of a mad scientist is a very striking one. It conjures up these thoughts of a psychopath in a lab coat, either in a basement or on top of a mountain, performing terrible experiments as lightning crashes around him. And Rintaro totally buys into that whole shtick, except it's more like role-playing to him. He acts in a way that, while it's over the top, is also very charming and endearing for those around him, but he also does it to protect himself and others. I don't want to get too deep into it, but when you start to realize who he is at his core and why that persona is so very important for him to maintain, you begin to realize how selfless and heroic he really is. He's not a fighter. Hell, he's not even really all that clever, but he does try harder than almost any anime character I've ever seen, and I can only hope that put into a similar situation, I would do the same. I respect him deeply and am infinitely impressed with the voice actors that could somehow bring him to life and do him justice. Hell, I'm impressed that a character like this could even exist in anime. He's our main character for a reason, and while that is amazing, and I think he is amazing, it also does create a bit of a catch-22 because The fact of the matter is, he is our main character and we only see things from his perspective, which means no other character even comes close to his development or his characterization. Not by a mile. But whether or not that's a good thing, kind of depends on the story. This series has a slow start. And while I'm not usually one for something that doesn't catch my attention right away, I kind of have to make an exception here because of 3 words: pacing, detail, and Okabe. Steins Gate has perfect pacing. It is a very slow burn because it takes a realistic approach to an unrealistic situation. Science is a long and arduous process and it takes time to fully understand, just like 3-dimensional characters. Usually in American television, we get several seasons to learn about and develop a character, but much like most other anime, Steins Gate only had 1 to do it in. So what they did is they took the time to let us fully understand these characters and their situation, unlike a lot of other anime. And the thing about a slow burn, at least in this case, is that it starts off as an ember, something small and seemingly insignificant that slowly builds up over time before eventually erupting into an inferno. And that wait, that buildup before the blast, before the explosion, that's called suspense. It makes you want to see what that fireball is gonna look like when it finally erupts into the sky, unlike something that's just lobbing fireballs at your head all day long from scene 1. Like, you know, counting a kill. That was a weird cough. When we as viewers are oversaturated with the extremes like death, explosions, the world ending, it becomes mundane because it's the new normal and it becomes extremely difficult to one-up. But when it builds just right, that's when you can really appreciate it. The entire premise of this story is for Okabe to learn how to time travel. It begins with a text, but then spans into literal world-changing events. And I'm not just talking about trying to save Kurisu, I'm talking about dozens of tragedies that spiral out of control into a future that Skynet would envision while stroking its T-1000. And now for the detail. Time travel isn't something we can do. Probably. But it is something that we've theorized about since the invention of time, and this show did its research. From the John Titor plot point, which, yes, was a real thing, to the use of CERN, the Large Hadron Collider, and even the IBM 5100. While obviously not all of the science is accurate, I always enjoy it more whenever a story takes aspects of reality into account and tries to make it work within the confines of their story. Now, when I talk about detail, that is only a small portion of what I mean. Sure, the application of real-world science into the story is interesting, but what truly fascinates me is the foreshadowing. I already mentioned that the slow burn of this series was completely intentional, and nothing goes to further that point than rewatching it. The foreshadowing in this series is insane. From episode 1, they give you hints at every single major plot point in the entire series, which not only creates a well thought out story, but also gives you something that most other series don't: rewatchability. And finally, we come to my favorite part of the series, Okabe! Okabe is our main character, and as such, we follow him throughout the majority of the story, and whenever something changes in the timeline, he's the only person to remember it. This is a bit of a double-edged sword, because while Okabe gets to remember what happens in the timeline, and it affects him and causes him to develop, the fact that the timeline is constantly changing doesn't allow any other character to develop, because they don't remember it as time constantly resets. Now, don't get me wrong, other characters do have reveals in depth, but those things are due almost solely to their backstory, because again, just by its nature, this show does not allow them to actually develop. How do I explain this? Okay, think of it this way. Backstory is how a character became who they currently are, and development is how they become who they're meant to be. But this is a good thing, because this entire series is a character study into who Okabe is, and our empathy for all of the other characters is solely dependent on his. If he cares about them, and if this is done right, then we will too. Okabe starts off our series as this over-the-top goofball, and that is perfect, because it makes him immediately likable and entertaining. And when you like somebody and when you're entertained by them, that's when you get drawn in. And as soon as you get drawn in, they start to unravel the layers of Okabe, and you start to understand who he is at his core, not just at a surface level. And when that happens, and when you begin to care about this character, you don't just care about him, you care about the things he cares about. You care about the people that he cares about. You don't want bad things to happen to these people because it'll hurt him, even if you don't like those people. That is caring, that is empathy, that is how you make a main character. There's none of this overblown willpower will save the day, or my bravery is stronger than everybody else, or I can punch real good. There's none of that. Because those characters, you might like them, but you know what? You like them because you want them to win. With Okabe, you want him to win because you like him. That's the difference. And again, it all comes back to a slow burn, slow movement, slow pacing, slow development, slow reveals. All of that is meant to keep you in suspense until the end, until the big climax points begin to happen. They want you to care, so they take the time to make you. The whole entire architecture of this series is based on the foundation that is Okabe, and I find that foundation to be so strong that the rest of the series is almost damn near unshakable. So this is it, right? Perfect show, 10 out of 10. Fuck no. This show has uninteresting and underdeveloped characters, even if for good reason, time resets, and about a 50-50 shot on whether or not you're even gonna like the ending, but that's the thing. Perfection is unobtainable. It doesn't exist. You're never gonna see a perfect 10 out of 10 show on this channel because there is no such thing. Everything has flaws. That's the thing about entertainment. You don't go into entertainment, you don't go into watching a show, listening to a song, playing a video game, expecting perfection. And you don't go in looking for every fault you can find. You go in to be entertained. And if it does that, then it did its job. Perfection might not exist, but Steins Gate does. And Steins Gate brought with it a great storyline and probably my favorite character in anime. One of the most well-developed, likable characters I've ever seen in anything. So no, it's not perfect. But you know what? I'm glad I watched it, and I think if you go in not expecting perfection, you will be too. And that's it for me, guys. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button. If you want to see more, subscribe. And as a special thank you for hitting 600 subscribers, I'm giving away this beautiful Makase Kurisu figure to one lucky subscriber. All you have to do is be subscribed and comment down below, Mad Scientist, so I know you're interested, and I'll choose my winner in the next video, which hopefully won't take as long to come out as this one did. You did it. You saved the...
Finally, I did it. I killed that son of a...
You do realize you killed the wrong guy, right? And I'm assuming you only put one bullet in that gun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, don't worry about it, big guy. You'll kill me next time.
You really think so?
No. No, I do not.
No! God, please, no! 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 No!